Hi Stampers, this is Angela with Wild Violets Art. I am going to show you how to do some basic watercolor. Stampin' has some really gorgeous sets that you can easily incorporate watercoloring. They also carry this really wonderful Fluid 100 watercolor paper, and they have water painters. So I'm going to do a background for a card like this. And I created this little treats bundle from here, and I used the little blossom, but I used the treat box and the verse from this little treats bundle. This is just a little over $50. It's in the new holiday catalog, and I saw a similar treat box to this on Pinterest and just fell in love with it. It was just so gorgeous, and the colors are so subtle and pretty, and it gave me an opportunity to get my watercolor skills back in play. And so I thought I'd show you real briefly how to get this effect. So I usually put a piece of plastic down, and then I've cut one of the Fluid 100 paper or cardstock in half, so I'm working with a smaller piece. I'm going to use the bigger painter, but they have these other, they have like a small fine tip, they have a medium tip, and then they have this wide tip, which is good for large sweeping brush strokes. So when I'm painting watercolor, I'm typically using my stamp pads. Some people don't like to dirty the inside, but what I do is I squeeze them together, and what that does is it provides a little bit of the ink on the inside. Now, if you need a much darker, richer color, then you can use the refills and drop them in there. So for like this card, I wanted the flowers to have a background of the same color of the petal pink. So this stamp pad is the petal pink stamp pad. And then I have the soft sea foam that I'm going to use for the lower area. The first thing you want to do to prep your paper is you want to spritz it with water. It may not last very long, so you may have to do it again, but I want big sweeping colors. I don't necessarily want it to be stark. I'm adding more water to this so that it's really nice and wet. And then I'm just going to, I don't really care where I'm putting it. I just want the color up here at the top. So if you're trying to get something more definitive, then you maybe don't add so much water, but I really like this look. So I usually typically use a wipe or something to get a little bit of the color off of my paintbrush, just so that it doesn't transfer into another one of my stamp pads. So I'm using the soft sea foam for the other color. Again, I'm adding lots of water to this. I have water still on my paper, and I think I may want a little bit more color in there. So I'm squeezing again, and then just adding a little bit more of the green. Now, while this is setting up, I'm just going to put it aside and let it dry for a bit. I'm going to be doing another sheet so that I can get these petals and some of these leaves. Now, as you can tell, some of these leaves are vellum. Some of them are the soft sea foam cardstock like this, but these little tiny sprigs, they were just scraps of watercolor paper that I had. So I went ahead and just colored them and then cut them out with the die cuts. They're from Forever Flourishing, from the Forever Fern suite and bundle. And the Forever Flourishing dies have just all kinds of beautiful foliage. So, actually I need the petal pink. Cleaned off my brush. So you can just use the refills, and I'm just going to put a couple of drops in here just so I have a little extra. And then of course you need to add water to it so it's not too dark. Okay, so I've got another piece of the Fluid 100 paper. I'm going to spritz it again so that it's, this time I just kind of want color spots. I don't necessarily want it all the way across, big sweeping pieces. So I'm just gonna, because I'm gonna punch out blossoms. So I don't necessarily want it to be consistent. There's a method to my madness. I don't want it to be full colored all the way across. I want to see some white in some places, and I can choose where I do my blossoms, where I punch out my blossoms. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the soft sea foam. Just add a couple of drops because I'm not able to get as much as I need. Again, I'm just squeezing my brush a little bit to add more water because I don't want it very dark. And I'm just going to add spots of color because again, I don't necessarily want it to be all the way across. I'm just going to let it bleed as it wants to. Now you can choose to dry this with a blow dryer if you'd like, or you can just let it air dry. And when you use a blow dryer, you just have to be careful about the paper curling. So it is gonna, even just naturally, it's gonna curl a little bit. And for this one, I'm going to let it dry for just a few more minutes, and then I'm going to run it through the embossing machine, the Stampin' Cut embossing machine. As you can see, I used the 3D Subtles embossing folder, and while it was still damp, it just makes the texture that much richer. And then I took the time to curl up the edges, and because it was slightly damp, I let it sit, and it becomes really firm and it stays in place. Watercolor paper is really nice to be able to form 3D flowers. And these now, it's going to be pretty hard for them to sit down. They're pretty firm where they're located and how they're shaped because they were slightly damp again. And once they dry, they crisp up really nicely. And so it makes for a great 3D card. So my cardstock is now dry enough that I can put it through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss and use this 3D embossing folder. Now you can see the texture is just really, really beautiful. And now I can turn up the edges or whatever I want to do to this cardstock and have it pretty much stay as I created it. So to turn up the edges, I typically just use my fingernail, or you can use like an edge of a pair of scissors. And after it's dry, I'll do this some more to kind of roughen the edges a little bit more. I like it to have not necessarily a ragged edge, but a distressed edge. It just kind of adds a little bit more to the 3D effect of the card and gives it some dimension, makes it look like old paper, old parchment, however you want to do it. So this is going to be the top of where I put all the petals, and the green is going to be where I have the stems and the ribbon. So this piece is ready for me to punch and also do some die cutting. So I'm punching out where I put the blobs of color. Some of them I like to have, you can see the color variations. Just makes for really pretty blossoms. The cardstock is still slightly damp. Get more shape into them, and I'll show you that in just a second. So what I'm using is, these are the foam pieces that come in the clear block case, and I just saved it because I liked having the foam to put pins or whatever I want. This is the take your pick, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub the center a little bit to try to get the petals to cup up, and then just each petal just a little bit to get it to cup up as well. So you can see that you just get really cute little 3D flowers. If you do this one that's still damp, then it's better than if you wait till it's dry, or 100% dry. Okay. So next I'm going to save these because I can get from the pick a border punch, the flower punch, I can get more of these little blossoms out of it, and I'm gonna take the opportunity to do that. But from this piece I can use the Forever Fern, or sorry, Forever Flourishing dies from the Forever Greenery suite, and I'm going to use these three right here on this piece, because what I tend to do is once I layer my vellum piece, which is this one here, and I cut out a full vellum piece of this, and I tuck them where I want behind the vellum, behind the soft sea foam piece, which is this one. Then I just put the little pieces back behind to make it look fuller without necessarily adding tons of layer to the card. So go back and place this where I want it. Now you just take out what you need. And you can see how pretty these elements are. Having some white and having the green show, it just really pretty. So I'll continue to die cut more of these. You can see I pretty much used every little piece that I could. It's now to a point where there's really not much else I can get from it. And the foliage is coming along just perfectly to make a beautiful bouquet. So it's like a bridal bouquet or a wedding shower bouquet. And next I'll do the vellum. But this was pretty much to show you how to just try a little bit of watercolor with your die cuts, your punches, embossing folders, or even just on a sheet of paper. It can be really beautiful and make for really distinctive, elegant cards. Thanks for joining me. Again, my name is Angela, and I'm with Wild Violets Art. You can go to my blog, YouTube, Pinterest, and my Facebook page. Thanks so much.